Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio. I've got Dora Konomi with us tonight, and we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about mortgage fraud, and we're going to talk about fraud generally, because I think it's a big issue, mortgage fraud, particularly as we see some of the impacts in the real estate market right now. Dora Konomi is a lawyer, and she specializes in fraud, and she's going to talk about this. But in addition, she's a radio host on Chin Radio, and we're going to talk a little bit about how she got into radio and what she does, and that's going to be interesting. She's also a community advocate that's known for her strategic mindset and passion for litigation. Passion for litigation. Who has a passion for litigation? Dora does, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Dora Konomi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for that great introduction. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you so much for joining. You're a proud member of the Greek Canadian community. You emigrated to Canada when you were 14 years old, and you're still very connected to the Greek community. And you've got an award-winning show called the Doralicious Show. The Doralicious Show, really?
It's all about me.
Fantastic. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But you went into to law, and you're focusing right now on fraud. Why fraud?
So it all ties down to why I became a lawyer. I moved here at the age of 14, as you mentioned. And number one, I was a talker. So from a very young age, my parents, I think I terrorized them. They said, go become a lawyer because you should be getting paid to talk. Number two, I'm an immigrant kid. You have two options. You become a lawyer or a doctor. My math skills were not great, so I went to law. And third, and most important, by being an immigrant, you see a lot of the difficulties that people are facing. And it was a way that I could help people. How do I make their lives better? And I've seen situations that people, because of their immigrant background, their inability to communicate in English and understand, they've been defrauded. So I went into law so I could help people. And then I went into litigation because I'm a talker, as I said, but also you can be boots on, hands on, fighting for people and making a difference. And I never represent the other side. I always represent the victims of fraud, not the other way around.
So you never representing the insurance company or the big corporate interests that are defending against fraud?
I mean, if the corporation has been defrauded, yes, I've acted for the Ontario Securities Commission in the past that on behalf of investors who have been defrauded, but not the other way around.
Okay. And so, I've heard a lot recently about mortgage fraud, and so we're going to come to that specifically. But tell me about sort of the general areas of fraud that you see right now. Where are you seeing fraud? Where do you see that people are hiring you the most?
Real estate. Because it's one of the areas that you can file certain documents. There can be lack of due diligence, and someone can have a house with $2 million mortgage to have no idea it happened. So a lot of in real estate and employee fraud. Those are kind of the two big areas that we see. And a part of it is also investment fraud, where people invest money for real estate constructions and they're given 12% interest and payments. So there is certain payments, and then it ends up being a pyramid scheme. And there's no money out there. There is no construction project. And everyone's left without money.
You said employee fraud?
Yes, employee fraud, where we see it a lot. People are controllers or they work in corporations, and there's lack of due diligence, right? They have unchecked power. They create fake invoices. They pay themselves. They divert funds. So we see that a lot as well.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that. And so what do you do there? You're working for the company to try to get the money back?
Yeah, it's a combination. Number one, you get to see where did the money go? Can we even blame this employee? And then we start the litigation. Once we have a little bit of evidence, we see, did you take the money? What accounts did this go to? Did it go to your family members? Did you pay your school's private education through company money? So you trace the money.
You wrote me that you think that there's a surge in fraud cases. Really? Why?
Well, just the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center last year said that in 2023, there were over 530 million lost to fraud, which is a 38% increase from 2022. That alone is an indication of what we see. And it comes with economic pressures. It comes to digital vulnerability, crypto, and people are becoming very, very smart at creating fake documents with AI that you can't even tell that they're fake until you really dig into it. So, and I see it all the time. I go to court. I have friends who practice in the industry, and we've never seen a world where fraud is so prominent. And let me say, they don't care. They don't care. They just do it.
Why why economic reasons do you think? Is this like just a justification that people have to why they're doing things that are wrong, illegal?
So there, I call this the triangle. First, you need to have certain economic pressures, right? A lot of, and we see that a lot in times of recession. I mean, we're going through unstable times. We don't even know what's going on with our own economy and our neighbors down south. So, number one, there's pressures coming. Sometimes it can be economic pressures. Sometimes it can be family pressures. Sometimes it can be personal pressures that people are facing. Then you have an opportunity. So when the need and opportunity meet each other, that's when it creates the breeding grounds for fraud. And third, there's a justification. Sometimes people to justify their actions, because we're human beings, they say, well, this person deserved that, or the company deserved to be defrauded. They're bad people. So there's some sense of not a moral compass, but a justification for the fraud that I'm committing. And I'll say, these frauds, they're not always coming from sophisticated parties. They're coming from parties that work, for example, in a corporation. They're like, okay, no one's going to know something $1,000 today. And that $1,000 can turn to a few $1,000,000 later.
You said crypto was a reason for the increase in fraud. I thought crypto was a way of having the blockchain take care of all of the filing of all of these transactions. So it was impossible to create fraud. How is crypto a source of fraud?
Oh my God, we see it all the time. People take people's money and it disappears. It gets paid into a cryptocurrency and we can never take it back. Because if you take money from a company, for example, right, and you put in your bank account, regular bank account in one of our big banks in Canada, there's remedies that I can go to court, I can freeze those assets, and the money's there until the hearing of a case. If it goes digitally, good luck. No one will ever recover. We've been in situations that we've brought these Moreva injunctions that are about like freezing these cryptocurrencies. No one has ever recovered. God knows where they're going to end up.
Are our fraud legal rules tough enough?
I'm going to give you a very lawyerly answer, and it depends. It depends. I mean, we do have a great court system that responds to urgency. However, do we have sanctions? So we have the Ontario Securities Commission when it comes to investment fraud. They do a very good job at trying to catch people and give penalties. But then, apart from that, it's up to both the police and the lawyers. Sometimes those two branches don't necessarily talk with each other. Just last summer, we had the shooting of Misagi, who had misappropriated millions and millions of dollars from investors, and ultimately an investor went and shot him because he could never recover money. And that was over 12 years of litigation because he used the system, he declared bankruptcies again and again, delayed the whole process, and made it so difficult for people to recover money that 12 years later, no one had seen their money back. So is our system perfect? No. However, we do have a good team. We have great judicial teams in Toronto, our judges, we have great judges. However, we still lack resources. And should we be tougher? Maybe. But that's up to the legislator to change their stance.
I've heard a lot of people talk about extortion recently. Is this something you deal with? And how does that differ from fraud?
So there's the criminal aspect and then there's the civil aspect. So what I've seen happening is people owe a lot of money and they can't get financing from the main lenders. So they go to tier 2 or tier 3. That means they're paying interest only 20% sometimes. And is there a world that they can be extorted for that? Yeah, because they have no means of paying that money back. And that's when we see, because they're so desperate, they go into other ways to recover funds so they can pay those lenders. And sometimes they can be questionable too. I've heard people fear for their lives.
It's crazy. How'd you get focused on fraud as a specialty?
Again, I think it was back because I wanted to help people. And I ended up at a firm when I first started that they did a lot of fraud. And I was very interested And from day one, that's what I've been litigating. And I'll tell you, it's a great world. You need to have a thick skin. Fraudsters will always find a way to delay things. And you just need to play their game and play better and be smarter.
What a fascinating area of a lot of focus on. It's interesting. We're going to take a break for some messages, and when we come back, I'm going to focus in the conversation on real estate and specifically mortgage fraud, because that's one area that I think has increased fairly dramatically, and because of the current market, where real estate prices are coming down, are under pressure. I think a lot of these potential mortgage frauds, which some people may have said, "Oh, I just, I exaggerated my income on the mortgage papers or something like this," and maybe it's comparable to what you had just said, Dora, in regards to their justification of it or their economic need for it. Those frauds could come home to roost, and people could be in real trouble now. And so we're going to come back and talk about that in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes talking about fraud. Real estate fraud, mortgage fraud. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We've got a guest, Dora Konomi, with us tonight, talking about fraud. And she's a lawyer, a dynamic lawyer. She's also a radio host and a community advocate. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. But in regards to her civil and commercial litigation, where she focuses on construction disputes, fraud, debt enforcement, and condominium law, she's earned a strong reputation as a trusted advocate in complex legal matters. She's committed to education, professional development, teaching young lawyers, presenting professional courses, sought after media voice, legal commentary, and insights on current issues. Dora, we were talking about real estate fraud as one of the frauds that's increased. And I think mortgage fraud is one of those areas that have increased a substantial amount. I've heard about it a lot lately as people, were out there buying pre-construction condos a couple of years ago, and several of them, and sometimes financing them based on their home equity lines of credit. And they were potentially exaggerating their income on the mortgage documents that they were submitting to the banks and sometimes even to private lenders, as they just saw the real estate prices going up and they wanted to buy more and more and more because they saw this as an option on the increase in real estate prices. And they never thought they'd actually have to close on the homes or the condos because they'd be able to sell those condos before they actually had to make the final payments via assignment sales. And as long as the real estate market was, going up and up and up and up and up, the mortgage bankers didn't care. The brokers didn't care. They never had to actually, raise that final payment to close on the house, and everything was good. And they sold via assignment sales, and they pocketed 2-3 times the down payment they had made. Now, with real estate prices going down, people need to close on those condos, and the mortgage brokers and or the mortgage providers are seeing that the income just isn't there, and or the appraisals aren't there, and people are having difficulty closing. And then these people are finding that the developers, the builders, are suing them because they were supposed to close. They can't close. They're not closing. And now the contractor or the developer is saying, but you contracted to close, and people are being sued for millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. What's going on?
Let me give you a little bit of background on that. So you were right. People thought they're going to make so much money. They're going to sell an assignment because that was the market. People made a lot of money. Their friends made a lot of money. I'm like, well, if my friend can do it, I can do it. And then they said, well, I never really have to pay any money. I'll pay my deposits, the 10%, the 5% over time. And then when time comes, I'm going to sign it. But that was at a value of a condo, let's say at $700,000. Now the very same condo is valued at $500,000. So they go to the bank and they're like, hey, bank, I need to close. Give me some money. The bank is like, hold up. This condo, when I first approved you, perhaps a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, or maybe 6 months ago, was an X value. Now it has dropped. So I can only give you a mortgage of up to, let's say, 3/4 of the price. But that's not enough to close. So people get stuck in a situation that if they don't close, they will be sued by the builder saying, you owe me the difference in price. Like if I sell, but I drop the money, you owe me the difference. So now they're under pressure. Remember when I talked about that pressure?
Big time.
So what do? Do they go out and find money? Are they going to go to B lenders? They're going to be paying them 30%. They're never going to be able to keep up. Are they going to work with teams of people that they fake mortgage applications? And I'm telling you, it's a whole team. I've been in situations where this is what happens. Friend goes to his community, be like, hey guys, do you want to be private lenders? I'm going to give you an opportunity. You want to invest in mortgages. It's a guaranteed income. So people, like have maybe a few $1,000s saved aside. So I'll give you 50,000. I'll give you 70,000. So they pull that money, and now they give money to people to close. They tell the lenders that they're like, you're going to be a second mortgagee. And they're like, okay. They go to the lawyers. Everything is signed. They see on paper that they're going to be mortgagees. What happens on the other side is that they take that money, they write applications, say, oh, this is a gift. So they go to any major bank. Oh, yeah, this person can actually close because they got $50,000 as a gift, or $100,000, or whatever that amount is from a family. So that's a fake application. And sometimes they inflate income. So they go to the main bank saying, yeah, give us the money. We have enough to close. They pay the builder or the seller, whoever it is. And then the lender, they told them, oh, yeah, you're second mortgagee. But they registered the mortgage 2 or 3 days or a week later from the first mortgage. At this point, most lenders, they don't pull title searches to see when things were registered. They rely on the lawyers that they were introduced to. They rely on their mortgage brokers. They rely on their community leaders. So we have situations where people end up purchasing a condo. They pay the first bank, that start making payments, but it's impossible to keep up, and they default. At that point, upon default, that's when the second tier lenders, they realize, I just invested money, but I'm not getting my monthly payments, whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's interest only, sometimes it's interest and principal. And that's when the investigation starts. That's when they come to me, they're like, what's going on? And then we do investigations, and we realize the entire scheme that has taken place, that often involves lawyers. Sometimes the lawyers are not involved, they're just negligence, or they're being duped into a scheme. Mortgage brokers, sometimes even mortgage brokers who are not even licensed. So there's teams out there that help people close, but at what cost?
And this lender that's in second position with the depreciation in the real estate prices has probably got no chance of being recovering their money.
There's going to be likely no equity. But what happens, right? If people are registered and licensed, for example, if a lawyer is licensed and does the whole transaction, lawyers have insurance. So do mortgage brokers. So then you commence an action and you bring in those people to say you were negligent at the very least. You might not have been.
So you're suing the lawyers? You're suing the mortgage brokers?
Absolutely. If there's enough evidence to say that the mortgage brokers were part of the scheme, absolutely. If the lawyer was not part of the scheme, but they were negligent in the advice or the lack of advice sometimes, or there was a conflict of interest that was not declared, there's a world that negligence can be attributed to the lawyers that added to the loss of these lenders.
You also talked about fraudulent transfers. Tell me about that.
Oh boy, we see that all the time. So really? What happens is, all the time, that's what I do. That's my bread and butter. People don't realize it. But part of that is, so let's say, like, I'm going to give you 2 examples. Example 1, I own a home. I live in my home. I pay my mortgage. Everything is great. I have no idea. Most people don't pull title searches to see what's going on with title to their property. Then they get a notice of default. They're like, what the hell is going on? I don't know what this guy is. I don't know $100,000. So someone has signed fake documents, granted a mortgage to God knows who, taken that money, and now, as an innocent homeowner, you might be stuck with a mortgage that you had no idea existed.
Why would you be stuck with it if it's a fake document, a fake mortgage?
Because there could be a world that the lender was also duped into it. So there is a fight. If you have 2 innocent parties, who's to be blamed? Is it land titles? Is it the lawyers? Is it the fraudster? Can we even catch the fraudster? And I was.
So you're telling me that someone could put a fake mortgage on my property and I didn't know about it, so I didn't make the payment, so that the lender claims a default and then comes and takes my property for something that I didn't sign, that it was a fake signature for?
Unfortunately, there's been situations like that, and that's why you need to go to the lawyer. So last week alone, I had a call from this immigrant family. They're like, I don't know what's happening. The sheriff is coming to get our house. So, and they had received documents, but they never appreciated them. So I looked into it, and there has been a fake mortgage through a mortgage broker that they had used in the past, granted something that they had no idea about. And now the sheriff, because there was a court order obtained by the lenders, is starting to take their house. It necessarily won't happen because we get involved and there's going to be litigation steps that we take, but it happens more than people realize it does. And you're stuck in situations that it doesn't make sense. And you know what? It doesn't. You shouldn't
Doesn't
have to
make
deal
sense.
with it. It
And
doesn't.
you're saying that with AI, sort of these fake documents, fake signatures are more prevalent today?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen situations where a seller, she wanted to sell her condo, and then she realized there was a mortgage. I'm like, hold up, what's going on? So we went to the lawyer, asked for disclosure. She had an ID. The person who went in looked like her, had an ID, and then we compared the original ID, her ID, versus the fake ID, and it was so similar. You could not have told the difference. And the lawyer who did the transaction was duped into it.
If you've discovered that you're subject to a fraud, what should you do?
First of all, call a litigation lawyer right away. You want a lawyer who deals with this fraud, because if a property has been transferred away from your name or a corporation that you own, you want to secure that that property doesn't go anywhere else, or is not further encumbered, or is not further transferred. So go to a lawyer, talk to a lawyer, so you can strategize about the steps. And that could potentially mean that you bring a motion for a certificate of pending litigation, which essentially says you can't do anything with this property. We're freezing the property. At the same time, also go to the police. So you need to be working concurrently. Talk to the police, report it. They will do their own investigations, but go to a lawyer so you can preserve your rights.
What can you do ahead of time to protect yourself from frauds like this? Is there anything?
I mean, are you really going to be pulling title searches every month or every year? It's not feasible for the average person. I'll tell you what I see. I see a lot of it happening in investment properties where people don't live in those properties, or vacant properties where people are abroad and people realize that, so they don't receive notices. I mean, I would say it wouldn't be a bad thing every year, maybe just to check title to your property, see what's going on. But I understand it's also not feasible. You can't think, oh, I'm going to be defrauded now.
Can you take out insurance against fraud?
Unfortunately, most insurances right now, as far as I'm concerned, they have exceptions about fraud, so they won't even pay you.
You're kidding. So you can't even have insurance against fraud. So you're saying that every once in a while, every couple of years, you should be checking title on your properties.
I mean, it would be the best thing to do. I mean, I had a situation where my guy, he's a share officer and director of a corporation, the only shareholder as well. And that corporation owned a couple properties. And he realizes that by receiving an insurance slip from a different name. I'm like, hold up, what's going on? And it was that one little piece of paper that triggered him to realize something is off. So then he went to his real estate lawyer, and then we uncovered the fraud, and we're in litigation right now. But it wouldn't be a bad thing to do once in a while.
That's crazy. Unbelievable that we have to protect ourselves like this. And I've heard, stories about, people in bank accounts losing money, in mortgages being defrauded, institutions that find out that people have filed mortgage documents that are completely fraudulent and wrong and exaggerated. Certainly resumes that are submitted to companies that are dramatically overinflated and talk about jobs that either lasted longer than people said, or were for compensation that were dramatically more than what was the truth. So checking in on what's going on, I think is doubly important today, more so than it may have been in the past, regrettably. And you're probably right that AI makes a lot of these frauds easier. I've seen people that have actually edited PDF documents to change the fact base, and that's very concerning. If people find that they need to talk to a litigation lawyer, who should they call?
Call me, Dora Konomi at Walker Law. But other than that, we have great litigation teams in Toronto. Find someone, talk to them, and act fast. I can't stress that enough. Act fast, because they will outrun.
Is there a website that you've got that people should go to?
Yeah, you can write Dora Konomi at Walker Lawyers. You can find us, and you can book free consultations as well. You can talk to us, and we have an incredible team. My chief law clerk is amazing. She does all our investigations, and it's a whole team that we work together. And we're very quick. We've been doing this for years. So, and I always say my law clerk, she's the one who taught me how to do these things too.
Well, that's great to have such fantastic support. We're going to take a break for some messages. When we come back, we're going to talk to Dora about her radio show, because she's got a weekly radio show that you've been doing for how long? 9 years?
12 years.
12 years. Unbelievable, on Chin Radio. And what's it called?
It's called the Doralicious Show, because it's all about me.
Doralicious Show, because it's all about Dora. That sounds interesting. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Now, this is going to be fun because I got Dora Konomi here, who is a lawyer, a radio host, and a community advocate within the Greek community. And she actually has a weekly radio show that she's been doing for 12 years called the Doralicious Show on Chin Radio, where she uses her platform to engage audiences and spotlight important causes, work within the Hellenic Heritage Foundation and the Advocate Society. And it's, you say, all about you? How did you get into doing a show that's all about you?
You know what? It's kind of a joke. So I'll take you back. I was about 19, 20. It was the right time, the right people. I bumped into my producer at that point, who was creating this idea of modern ethnic radio. And it was Stan Papulkas. Stan Papulkas had built Omni Television at that point. He had built Rogers Studios and radio. He had a wealth of background knowledge. So he wanted to build something in the community that was young, that was fresh, that was something for people to understand. It was both in English and Greek, and it wasn't targeted to an older demographic. He met me, he goes to me, "You're very bubbly. You have color." He's like, "You have no idea about radio, but I can teach you radio. I can't teach you personality." And that's how we met. Sorry. We met. He liked me. He gave me, I remember, a radio commercial to read. I guess I did really well with it. And then we started. And then the name came. How do we name the show? It was during the time that I was creating my first Instagram account, and I didn't know how to create an Instagram. I was finding for names, and I was playing with names. So then I created my Instagram account, Doralicious. And then my producer says, "You know what? That's the show. That's your show." So then it became the Doralicious Show. And I say, when it's all about me, it's all about the community. I tell everyone in my community, it's not my show, it's our show. It's the voices that matter that often are not heard that will be on this show.
The voices that matter that aren't always heard. That's a great line. And who do you interview?
I interview people from various walks of life. I've had celebrities, I've had politicians, I've won awards on stories about being Greek and transgender to talk about their experience and what it meant for them. I've won an award by CIMA, the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, on a story about a father and a kid fighting to raise a cure and raise funds for that child. So it can be anything and anyone that has a story and someone who needs to be heard.
Fantastic. And you said that this gentleman talked to you about radio. What did he teach you about radio?
First of all, you learn the very basics on how to record, what do people want to hear, and then he adapts it to you. I think you need to find your own voice. You need to know who you are. But there's also the technical aspect of it. How do you record? Where should you record? What is a studio? How to use software? So the very basic things. And then I remember I used to talk too fast. Slow down. When you think you exaggerate, that's when the audience gets it. So little tricks over time, it just becomes second nature. And I have to say, I think I'm a very good litigator because of my radio background.
Really, that's interesting. I think that you're right that talking to people and talking to the radio certainly focuses you on how to communicate. There's just no question.
And I also say this, like when you go to court, that's my stage. The way radio is my stage, so is court. Let me tell you why I'm right. Let me tell you why we need to stop these fraudsters.
So you interview primarily people within the Greek community, correct?
Or anyone that has a Greek flavor. So, for example, John O'Harley, everyone knows from Jay Peterman and Seinfeld, he was filming in Greece. So I had him on the show to talk about his experience filming in Greece. So anything that has a Greek flavor.
Okay, so I don't have any Greek flavor, so you can't interview me. That's too bad. How do people get your show? Where do they get it? What time is it on?
So it's a weekly show so you can catch it on Chin Radio, both Toronto and Ottawa, 97.9 FM in Ottawa, 3 p.m. And then online on agapigreekradio.com. And you can download our app, iTalk Radio, or you can check us out on social media. And we do a lot of clips that people can follow and listen.
What day of the week?
It's every Sunday. I always like to say it's Doralicious Sunday after Lord's Day. Tune in with us. And it's 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. 3 p.m. on the radio, 5 p.m. online.
Fantastic. So if I had a Greek connection and you were going to interview me, give me a sense. What would we talk about? How would you interview me? Why don't you interview me? Go ahead.
Okay, you know what? I like that. Let's do that. So, Brian, why radio?
Because as I think you said, there's lots of stories that need to get out, and I've got this incredible opportunity to get interesting people. Whether it be a politician or an analyst or a developer or a business person or just a regular person or a litigator like you, and get them on to talk to me for 47 minutes. And it's a unique opportunity to really get into what makes people tick, what they're passionate about, and understand it.
If people could say no, if people could not say no to you, what would you do with your show?
What if people could not say no to me? Who would I do as a future show?
Or what would you do with your show? Would you go national? Would you go international? Would you have Michael Jordan? Tell me. Answer no is not an answer. You could do anything. What would you do with your show?
Well, that's interesting. So I do think that, you've got to focus on the Greek community. I've got to focus on Canada. And so, I end up talking a fair amount about what's going on in Ukraine or what's going on in the United States or what's going on in Asia, but it's got a Canadian lens to it. It's got, how does Canada play a role or what should Canada's role be? So I don't think I'd go internationally, though I would refer to international events. I'd still be focused on how does it impact Canada. The radio show that I'm on, the radio station is Saga 960, which is focused on sort of West Toronto. It's not just Mississauga, but it's Mississauga, it's Brampton, it's Rexdale, it's Oakville, it's West Toronto. My signal doesn't go east of the Don Valley Parkway, so it's sort of Toronto and the Western GTA. So it's focused on Canada and focused on sort of the Western GTA, but the impact of the world on that. So what would I do? I'd have the prime minister on. I'd have some senior ministers on. I'd have the premier on. I would have, I had probably one of Canada's most successful tech entrepreneurs on last weekend. It was a great show. Be more people like that that may not want to come on a local radio station, but really should because they're speaking. I get 30,000 people a night on average, according to the statistics, and that's just on radio. I get more on social media. So it's a great vehicle to get your message out to people, and so it appealed to more people to connect like that.
And what would you tell a prime minister? Let's say Prime Minister Carney comes to the Brian Crombie show. What would you ask him, and what piece of advice would you give him about the stance that Canada should be taking?
So one of the things that I've been focused on for several years now is that I think we've been way too focused on redistribution and not focused enough on prosperity, productivity, and growing the Canadian economy. And I think that is something that came out a lot during the last election. We spoke about it a lot. I spoke about it a lot. A lot of my guests spoke about it a lot on this radio show in regards to where our focus needs to be. And I would ask the Prime Minister, how he's going to do that. Now we're going to have this huge increase in spending in defense. How can we use that to further productivity, innovation in the Canadian economy? I think that we're going to take down barriers across the Canadian economy as we get rid of interprovincial trade barriers and regulation. I'm going to ask him how we can make sure that aids the growth of the Canadian economy. I think that we've lost. There's 800,000 Canadians living in the United States. 800,000. That's bigger than a lot of Canadian provinces. That's a Canadian province that lives in the United States. Why have we lost so many good people, smart people to the United States? Why and how can we make a better Canadian economy that makes them want to come back, or at least doesn't lose them to the United States? So I think that we've got to have a far better focus on the Canadian economy, and I would like to ask him how he's going to do that. I think that the mandate letters that he sent out to the cabinet have suggested that's going to be his focus, but we still haven't heard how he's going to do it and how he's going to benefit us all, and how he's going to keep that focus when in the day in and day out of politics, people try to take you sort of off your track, and how he's going to stay focused on that.
And I know you've had a little bit of background in politics. I know you ran for mayor for Mississauga. Would you go back in politics? And if yes, what level of government?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd love to run for mayor of Mississauga again. The election's going to be a year from now. The current mayor is going to have to decide whether she runs for another mandate or not. I think if she runs for another mandate, she'll win. And the problem is that turnout in municipal elections is so low that the power of incumbency, the power of name recognition is just so high. And frankly, the sort of the special interest groups, the established interest groups that are involved politically and get a politician that supports some of their interests, it's very difficult to dislodge a incumbent, particularly when you don't have a lot of media. And I'm one of the only medias that focuses on a lot of those politics. I'll give you an example. The Toronto budget taxes went up by 9%. This past year, and people went nuts in the Canadian media, and politicians from various sides talked about how this was a travesty, and it was top of the news for quite a while. The municipal tax rates in Mississauga went up by 9%. Same amount. There was hardly a bleep. The Peel taxes went up by 23%. If any institution, any political institution, any municipality, any agency of government, anywhere in Canada went up by 23%, if there was actually a media, this would be number one news. If the OPP, if the RCMP, if the Toronto Metropolitan Police Force went up their budget by 23%, people would go crazy because either the expenses are out of control or crime's out of control, or both. But in Mississauga, it hardly got any news at all. So if a 23% increase in Peel police, people don't care about, and if a 9% increase in taxes, when Carney, Ford, et cetera, are talking about how we got to have tax increases, budget increases equal to inflation, which is 2% or less, and yet we go up by 9%, and people don't care, you're not going to be able to change people's votes. People just aren't listening. People don't care. And that's a problem. And if people don't care and people aren't listening, the incumbents are going to win. You can't have a new person. Now, if we got people upset and people started listening and people started, taking to the streets, maybe not militarily, but hopefully in protest and in commentary, then you got a chance. And then I think that you could have that kind of, go one step farther. You think about the controversies in Toronto, whether it be the Science Centre or Ontario Place or the Eglinton Crosstown or the development of the Downsview lands. At least stuff is happening. Nothing of strategic importance other than maybe the Huron Ontario LRT is happening in Mississauga. We seem to have lost the focus on big changes, visions for what can change your city. The renovation of the St. Lawrence Centre and the Meridian Centre is exciting, where we're building a huge centre for the arts in downtown Toronto. What's happening in Mississauga? I don't know. So I think that again, we've lost focus on economics. We've lost focus on strategic, visionary change. I think people are sleepwalking, and if people are sleepwalking, the incumbent's going to win.
You know what,
Wrong
Brian?
answer. I apologize.
No, I mean, you talked about me and how I'm passionate for litigation. You're definitely passionate for your community, and that translates really well. And I do have to say, I mean, we can learn from the Europeans. The European, one tax goes up, one thing changes, the whole government shuts down because everyone's out. So maybe there is something we can learn about that, and peaceful protesting and telling people what they shouldn't do if it's against what we believe in.
Dora, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. We're going to take a final break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments with Dora Konomi in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Real pleasure chatting with Dora Konomi, who's got the Doralicious show on Chin Radio every Sunday afternoon, but also is a civil litigator in regards to primarily fraud. Dora, if people never collect on their judgments, is that an issue? How do they collect eventually?
Oh, it's one of the biggest issues that we see out there, because if you have a judgment, that means you're holding a very expensive piece of paper. You spend thousands of dollars for it, and it means nothing. It's a piece of paper that means nothing because you can't collect. So there's a few things we do about it. Number one, before you start litigation, and I always do that with all my files, I do a due diligence. I do an original search. I'm like, if you sue this person, can you collect? What are your chances of collection? And that should be factored in every time someone decides to go after someone, because again, are you going to throw more bad money and never collect? It can be out of principle. But guess what? When you spend $100,000, principle goes out the window because you're never going to be able to see that money back. So that's my number one consideration when I start litigation. Now, when people come to me and they're like, hey, Dora, I have this piece of judgment against X person. I don't know how to collect. We do investigations. There's things that you could do. You can examine that person. It's called a judgment debtor examination. But guess what? Most of the time, they're not going to give you the information. They're not going to tell you where the money is. There's ways that we can garnish their bank accounts. We can garnish their employers. But guess what? Most of the time, they've rendered themselves judgment proof. At that point, we do investigations. And I want to say a lot of the times, these fraudsters, because they know they were going to owe money, or they already owed money, or they were entering into what we call a risky business, they have transferred properties out to their kids, their wives. And it could be wives transferring to the husband. I don't want to be stereotypical. But in that situation, we can target those transfers. What happens is you have a judgment against Brian. Brian transferred property to his son X. And he did that to defeat his creditors. Now I can attack that transfer. I can say that that transfer was done, either it was a fraudulent conveyance because it was done to defeat your creditor, or although the property legally is held by X, Brian is the beneficial owner of that property, and I can attack those transfers. It gets expensive because that means you have to start a second litigation to collect. Because when you have a judgment, you can file a writ, but the writ doesn't attach to the property until there's a declaration that, let's say, X is holding the property in trust for Brian, and then I can transfer the property back to Brian, and then I can attack it. So if people come to us, there's lots of steps we can take. It's expensive, it takes time, but it can be done. So my recommendation is, before you commence litigation, assess the merits of the case, but also the ability to collect. Is it worth it?
I guess one of the other things would be make sure that you do business with people that aren't fraudsters and are trustworthy.
But you never know. I will tell you about it more than, and again, this is not a fixed number, but more than 90% of contractors out there own no properties. All the properties are in their wives' names. So what do? How are you stuck? That's why it's very important to get referrals, progress payments, and see how you can mitigate the risk. But unfortunately, you can never prevent it fully.
Dora Konomi, thank you so much for joining us. Remind us if people want to or need to reach out to you to get some legal advice on fraud that may have occurred. How do they best contact you?
So you can go online, Dora Konomi at Walker Lawyers. You can send me an email at dora@tcwalkerlawyers.com, and I'm happy to chat with you.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. I hope none of you get caught up in a fraud, but I hope you get an opportunity to listen to Doralicious show. Sunday afternoons on Chin Radio, because that sounds like it could be inspiring by a very bubbly personality. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and chat with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on my website, briancrombie.com, on social media, on YouTube, and on podcast servers as soon as the radio show goes to air. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Good night.